All right, so get ready because today we are going deep, deep into a very specific part of the FDA regulations.
Yeah.
It might not sound very interesting at first, but believe me, it's actually all about making sure that the medications that we depend on, all of us, you and me, are safe and effective.
Uh-huh.
So we're talking about Subpart K of 21 CFR Part 211.
Okay.
This is basically the FDA's rule book for anyone who manufactures pharmaceuticals.
Right.
And we're going to focus on one very particular area, returned and salvaged drug products.
Okay.
So we're talking about any medications that, for whatever reason, have sort of boomeranged back to the manufacturer.
Yeah.
The big question is, what happens to those products?
Mm.
Can they just, get put back on the shelf?
Right.
Or is there a whole process to make sure that they are still okay to use?
Yeah.
So our goal today is to understand how Subpart K makes sure that any returned product that does end up back in the supply chain is completely safe and effective.
Absolutely.
And we've got a ton of resources to help us do just that. We've got excerpts from the CFR itself. We've got industry manuals that really break things down. And we even found some really interesting YouTube discussions with some quality assurance experts.
Wow.
So let's just jump right in. Why is Subpart K such a big deal when we're talking about, the pharmaceutical industry?
Well, think about it like this. It's basically the guardian of the entire drug supply chain.
Okay.
So any single product that has been returned is automatically suspect.
Okay.
Its journey back to the manufacturer, it could have been exposed to who knows what, right? Inappropriate storage, the temperatures could have fluctuated a lot. There could even be contamination.
Right.
All these things that could mess with the safety or how effective the medication is.
Yeah.
So Subpart K is really this set of rules that helps make sure that these returned products get the scrutiny they deserve before they even think about getting mixed back in with all the good products,
So they have to prove themselves worthy.
Exactly. It's gives the manufacturers this clear roadmap to follow, and it makes sure they're doing everything, absolutely everything they need to before that product can even be considered to go back on the market.
So they dot all their I's and cross all their T's.
Exactly.
Now, I was looking through these excerpts from the CFR, and it seems like this roadmap basically comes down to three main guidelines.
Right.
You've got inspection, segregation, and documentation.
Yeah, like a mantra, right?
Yeah.
Inspect, segregate, document.
Inspect, segregate, document.
Exactly. It's really those are the real cornerstones of this whole Subpart K thing.
Wow.
It's all about taking this really systematic approach to, figuring out how to evaluate and manage all these return products.
Okay, so let's break each of those down individually.
Sure.
When we're talking about inspection, what exactly does that entail?
This isn't just glancing at the package,
Okay.
We're talking about a really thorough, meticulous examination of every single returned product.
So it's a deep dive of its own.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a detective, searching a crime scene for every little clue.
Right.
The goal is to really find anything.
Okay.
Any signs of damage, contamination, or anything that just, throws up a red flag. That makes you question whether that product is, still good.
Okay, so let's say, for example, a bottle of pills comes back.
Yeah.
And the cap is cracked. Or maybe the pills themselves are discolored or something.
Right.
That would be a huge no-no.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If there's anything that shows that the packaging's been messed with, that means it needs to be treated like it could be dangerous.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't want, a leaky bottle of cough syrup or something getting mixed back in with the good stuff.
Exactly.
But okay, so let's say a product goes through inspection and it passes. What's the next step?
That's where the segregation part comes in.
Okay.
So even if a product seems okay from just looking at it, it still has to be kept away from the main inventory, Right.
Until a final decision's made about what's going to happen to it.
So it's kind of like a waiting room for returned products.
Yeah. They're under observation, until they get the green light.
Okay.
And this segregation thing is super important because it prevents any chance of a potentially bad product accidentally getting sent back out.
Right.
So it's all about minimizing the risk.
Yeah, minimizing risk, which leads us to that third pillar, documentation.
Right.
I feel like Subpart K is really, really big on paperwork.
It's essential, yeah.
Why is that?
Every single step of the process needs to be written down.
Okay.
Meticulously.
Okay.
From the second a product is returned to when the final decision is made about what to do with it.
Okay. Is that just so they have their bases covered in case there's an audit?
Well, it's more than just, covering your butt. It's about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So first of all, those detailed records, they create this really clear paper trail. Okay.
And that shows that the manufacturer is actually following all the Subpart K rules.
So if the FDA comes knocking, they've got the receipts to prove that they've been following all the rules.
Exactly. But on top of that, thorough documentation helps justify any decisions that were made about each product that came back.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, a manufacturer says, you know what, we're going to reject this whole batch of medication.
Right.
Well, they need to be able to back that up with really clear evidence.
Right.
Why are they rejecting it?
Right.
They can't just say, oh, well, we just didn't like the way it looked.
Right.
They have to actually say, okay, during the inspection, these specific red flags came up. So the records need to explain why they made each decision.
Okay.
And they need to show how they figured out the risk and how that led to them making that decision.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It adds a layer of accountability, and it makes the whole process more transparent. And I'm sure that transparency is super important for, maintaining that public trust in the whole pharmaceutical industry.
Definitely.
Now, one thing that kind of jumped out at me while I was reading through some of these sources was this concept of a risk-based approach. What does that mean exactly in the context of Subpart K?
It means basically acknowledging that not all products that are returned are the same.
Right.
So like, a box of medication that's just a little dented, that poses a very different level of risk than, let's say, a vial of insulin that's been left out in the sun,
Right. So like a minor cosmetic issue might not require the same like deep level of scrutiny.
Exactly.
As, something where you're really worried about the sterility of the product.
Exactly. Subpart K is encouraging these manufacturers to, think about it, and really tailor their inspection and evaluation procedures to the specific product.
Okay.
And the risks that might be involved with that specific product.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach for every single product that comes back.
Exactly. It's about focusing your resources, your attention on the things that are most likely to be a problem.
Now, this is where I imagine that detailed record keeping becomes even more important.
Absolutely, yeah.
If a manufacturer decides to maybe take like a less strict approach for a certain product, they need to be able to write down why they made that decision.
Right.
They have to show that they really thought about the possible risks and that they have a really solid reason for what they're doing.
Yeah. Their records basically become the proof that supports their thinking about the risk and the decisions they made because of that risk.
Okay, so we've gone over those 3 pillars of Subpart K inspection, segregation, documentation.
Yeah.
And now we've talked about this idea of a risk-based approach. It seems like this entire regulation is really all about making sure that no messed up product can slip through the cracks.
It's like a multi-layered system that's designed to keep patients safe.
Right.
And to keep that whole drug supply chain, strong and trustworthy.
And it seems like it really depends on having, clear procedures in place.
Yeah.
But also, having trained professionals who can use their judgment.
Exactly. It's not just about having rules. It's about having people who can apply those rules, intelligently and responsibly.
Right.
But that's something we can talk more about in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, as we kind of dig deeper into this whole Subpart K thing, it's kind of amazing how, all these tiny little steps, these really detailed procedures.
Right.
They end up having this, ripple effect,
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of ripple effect are we talking about here?
Well, think about it. When manufacturers are really, really careful and they follow all the Subpart K rules really closely, it kind of creates this wave of trust that goes out to everyone. So think about the healthcare providers.
Right.
They need to know for sure that the medications that they're prescribing to their patients, they have to be safe, they have to be effective, right?
Absolutely. They're putting their faith in these medications.
Right.
And ultimately, they're putting their faith in the companies that are making them.
Exactly. And that trust goes even further. It goes out to the patients, too.
Right.
I mean, we all want to know that the meds that we're taking, they've been handled the right way every step of the way,
So it's not just about protecting people from products that could be bad. It's also about protecting the reputation of the entire industry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Setting a standard,
Uh-huh.
a benchmark so
Right.
that everyone feels good
Yeah.
and confident about the medications that we all have to rely on.
And let's not forget about the legal stuff, too.
Oh, right.
If a company can prove
Yeah.
that they've been following Subpart K,
Uh-huh.
that's a huge protection for them.
Oh, absolutely.
If there's any legal problems,
Yeah.
or if a regulator starts scrutinizing them.
Right. Those records, all that documentation we were talking about,
Yeah.
that becomes their shield,
Yeah.
It proves that they were doing everything they could
Right.
to keep things safe and compliant.
Now, speaking of those records, I noticed in some of the stuff we were looking at, they mentioned technology.
Oh, yeah.
Is it getting more advanced than just like a file cabinet full of paper?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Technology is really changing the game.
Yeah.
When it comes to keeping up with Subpart K,
Uh-huh.
we're seeing a lot more companies switching over to electronic record-keeping systems. It makes everything so much easier, managing the data,
Right.
analyzing it, creating reports, all that stuff.
So instead of somebody having to go through like mountains of paper,
Right, exactly.
they can just pull up everything about a product.
Yeah, like with a few clicks.
Wow.
Yeah, it makes things so much faster. More transparent, more efficient.
Now, it's not just for record keeping, though, is it?
Right.
Technology is being used to actually improve the inspection process, too, right?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, think about all those fancy analytical techniques,
Okay.
like spectroscopy or chromatography, right?
Uh-huh.
Those tools can be used to, look at the return products on a molecular level.
Wow.
It's crazy they can find even the smallest signs of something being wrong. Like tiny amounts of degradation or contamination that you wouldn't even be able to see with your eyes.
Wow. So it's like giving the inspectors like superpowers.
It is. It's like giving them X-ray vision or something.
It's
It's all about really using technology to its fullest to make sure that nothing slips past,
Okay. Now, one thing about Subpart K that I thought was kind of interesting is this idea of reprocessing the returned products.
Right.
It almost sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Like, can you really take a medication that's been out in the world and somehow make it good as new?
It's not quite that simple, but yeah, Subpart K does say that reprocessing is possible.
Okay.
But it has a lot of very specific rules that have to be followed.
Okay, so it's not like just putting a new label on a bottle and saying, here you go.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Reprocessing means there are all these super strict procedures that have to be done to make sure that the product is brought back to the exact way it was originally made.
Okay.
And that it meets all the quality standards. It's kind of like, restoring a classic car.
Okay.
You need people who really know what they're doing,
Uh-huh.
special tools, and they have to be so careful about every little detail to get it back to perfect condition.
And I imagine there are some products that just can't be reprocessed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
No matter what you do.
If there's even a little bit of doubt about whether it's safe or effective, it's better to just say, nope, not taking any chances.
Right. Better safe than sorry. So reprocessing can't save money, right? If it's done correctly.
Yeah.
But you really have to balance that with making sure that patient safety is always number one.
Absolutely. That's the most important thing.
And that kind of brings us to another really important part of Subpart K.
Right.
The people involved.
Yes, the qualified personnel.
Okay, tell me about that.
Subpart K is very clear about this.
Okay.
Every single step of the process, from inspecting the products to segregating them to deciding what to ultimately do with them, it all has to be done by people who are trained and experienced.
Okay, so not just anybody can walk in off the street.
Definitely not.
And do this.
No, you need people who really understand the regulations, the science behind how the products are made, and all the possible risks that might be involved.
So these are the people who are making judgment calls, right?
Yeah.
Based on their expertise.
Exactly. So their qualifications are super, super important.
It makes me think of those crime scene investigators you see on TV.
Right.
You need someone who knows what to look for.
Yeah.
And how to figure out what the evidence means.
Exactly. Subpart K is more than just a bunch of cold, hard rules.
Okay.
It's about creating this culture of quality within these pharmaceutical companies.
So it's not just about following the rules. It's about having the right people in place with the right mindset.
Exactly. It's about creating a place where everyone understands that keeping things compliant isn't a chore, you know?
Right.
It's part of keeping patients safe
Right.
and making sure the company has a good reputation.
And when you think about how big the pharmaceutical industry is,
Oh, it's huge.
all over the world,
Right.
it's amazing how these regulations
Yeah.
that came from the FDA
Yeah.
affect what happens everywhere.
Absolutely. Subpart K has become like the gold standard for dealing with returned and salvaged medications.
Really?
Yeah, regulatory agencies and drug manufacturers. Wow.
All around the world, they look to the FDA for guidance, you know?
It really shows how committed the FDA is
Yeah,
to setting a high bar for quality and safety.
absolutely.
And that's something that's recognized all over the world.
Yeah, and it all comes back to protecting patients.
Yeah.
That's really the mission that drives everything.
Right.
It doesn't matter where you are.
Okay. So as we move into the last part of our deep dive here,
Uh-huh.
it's pretty clear that Subpart K isn't just a checklist of rules.
Right.
It's a whole way of thinking about how to handle drug products
It is.
and their journey through the supply chain.
It's recognizing that even products that have, like, taken a detour,
Okay.
products that have been returned, for whatever reason,
Uh-huh.
they still deserve to be looked at carefully.
Right.
They deserve the same level of care as the brand new products.
Okay.
It's about making sure that every single decision that's made about a returned product
Yeah,
has patient safety at the heart of it.
absolutely. But I'm kind of curious.
Is there more to the story?
Mm.
Does Subpart K affect things beyond just these returned and salvaged products?
That's a really good question, and it's one that we're going to explore as we wrap up this deep dive into this fascinating little corner of the pharmaceutical world.
So, as we've been going through Subpart K,
Yeah.
I can't help but think about just how huge the whole pharmaceutical industry is.
It's really mind-boggling, when you think about it.
Like billions of prescriptions
Yeah.
filled every single year,
Uh-huh.
countless medications moving around
Yeah.
through this whole complicated system.
I mean, it's this massive web,
Manufacturers, distributors, pharmacies,
It's incredible.
and with so much stuff moving around,
Yeah.
returns are bound to happen.
Well, for sure. It's inevitable.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Medications can get damaged while they're being shipped.
Uh-huh.
Patients might change their prescriptions.
Right?
Sometimes people just decide they don't need a certain medication anymore.
It happens all the time.
And it kind of makes you realize that Subpart K isn't just about handling those return products.
Mm-hmm.
It's about protecting the whole system
Right.
from anything that could disrupt it.
Yeah, like it's like a safety net,
Right.
making sure those return products don't mess up the whole drug supply chain.
And that's a pretty good feeling,
Right.
for those of us who depend on these medications.
Absolutely. It's like knowing there are these safeguards that keep that chain of trust going
Okay.
all the way from the factory
Yeah.
to the patient.
Okay, now one thing that stood out to me
Mm-hmm.
while we were doing research for this
Yeah.
is that Subpart K seems really comprehensive,
It is.
but it also seems pretty flexible,
Yeah, that's a good point.
like it can adapt.
The pharmaceutical industry is always changing.
Right.
New drugs are being made all the time,
Right.
new ways to package them, better ways to get them where they need to go.
Right.
Subpart K has to be able to keep up with all that.
So it's not just a set of rules that's stuck in the past.
Exactly. It's not like set in stone,
Okay.
It gives you the framework, the guiding principles,
Right.
but it lets companies decide how to actually put those principles into practice.
Okay.
And that's really important because you don't want old rules holding back progress or
Right.
stopping companies from doing things in new and better ways,
So it's like a living document, always changing with the times.
Yeah, exactly.
Always adapting to the pharmaceutical world.
And all that adaptability is key to making sure that patient safety always comes first.
Right. Even as technology changes, then the way we do things changes.
Absolutely.
Another thing that really struck me in our research
Yeah.
was how much Subpart K emphasizes the human element.
Oh, yeah, the people involved, right.
Yeah, it's not just about having systems and procedures.
Subpart K makes that very clear over and over again.
Okay.
Trained and qualified personnel are absolutely crucial.
It's about having the right people
Yeah.
with the right knowledge.
To actually make those systems work.
It's about recognizing that human judgment is super important
Mm.
every step of the way,
Yeah.
Like
Ah.
looking at the returned products,
Yeah.
deciding what to do with them,
Right.
All that requires people who know what they're doing.
It's like, I don't know, it reminds me of those air traffic controllers.
Oh, yeah, good analogy.
They have all these fancy systems and computers, but
Right.
in the end, it's their training,
Yeah.
their experience that keeps those planes in the air.
Right, exactly. And it shows that Subpart K is about more than just following the rules, you know? It's about building a whole culture of quality inside these companies.
So it's about making sure that everyone understands how important their job is to uphold those standards.
And that's something that goes beyond Subpart K, you know?
Okay.
That's a message for everyone in the pharmaceutical industry.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
What's the big takeaway we want to leave our listeners with?
well, Subpart K might be about returned and salvaged products, but the ideas behind it, being rigorous, being transparent, being accountable, those ideas are important for anyone involved in making medications.
It's about bringing those same high standards to every single part of the process.
Drug development, manufacturing, distribution, everything.
It's about understanding that keeping patients safe is a team effort. Everyone has to be involved. Everyone has to be committed to doing things the right way.
It's about creating that culture of quality that reaches every corner of this really important industry.
And with that, we want to encourage all of you listening.
Yes.
Keep exploring this world.
It's fascinating.
Keep asking questions. Stay informed. And always remember, even something like Subpart K, which might seem kind of boring or technical at first, can have a huge impact on people's lives.
It really can.
So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
For this deep dive into the world of returned and salvaged drug products. Until next time, stay curious.